All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be breaking down 7 questions that you need to ask a third-party logistics provider before you implement their services. Let's get into it. All right, guys, so like I said in the intro, today we're going to be breaking down 7 questions that you need to ask your third-party logistics provider or 3PL before going with their services. There's a lot of confusion out in the market, mostly being driven by the fact that there's just a ton of different providers. There's true 3PLs, there's brokers, there's TMS companies, there's 4PLs, there's carriers, really just a ton of different providers. And on top of that, they all offer different services, they charge differently, and so I think this just leads to a lot of confusion. And having participated in a lot of different sourcing and transportation bid events, I wanted to break down these 7 questions that I think are essential that you ask to the third-party logistics provider before you decide if they're the best fit for your business. So the first and most important question seems probably a little bit obvious, but stick with me, is to figure out what modes they offer expertise in. So there's a lot of different providers that are offering services in a lot of different modes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have expertise in that, right? So understanding, are you a full truckload broker? Are you a managed services provider, specifically in the less than truckload space? Do you offer small parcel contract optimization? Again, there's a lot of different modes, and if you're a company that ships in a lot of these different modes and you have full truckload and LTL and small parcel and occasionally you're shipping air freight and that sort of thing, you really need to make sure that you hone in on what challenge are you trying to solve, and does that provider have expertise in that mode? And not just do they say that they have expertise in it, but who are their experts? Do they have people, for example, that used to work in corporate pricing for carriers in the modes that you're trying to solve challenges for? How many bids have they done? How many pricing events have they actually managed? These are the types of questions that you really need to dig in and understand. And in addition to that, if you're trying to solve a challenge for your organization that might involve multiple modes of freight, then you really need to dig in and understand this a little bit better. And I'll give you an example. So we participate a lot in bid events that might involve what's called a bundled agreement, meaning that a company is utilizing UPS or FedEx to manage both their less than truckload and their small parcel. And when you have a bundled agreement, that means that the volume from those 2 modes of freight work in conjunction to drive higher discounts, right? And so a lot of times we find companies might come to us looking for help with less than truckload, not realizing that they have a bundled agreement. And if we just take all that less than truckload volume away, it's going to really impact their parcel pricing with UPS or FedEx negatively. And so it's up to us as consultants to kind of dig in and ask those questions and understand, hey, do you have a bundled agreement? And if we maybe take the LTL volume and put it in another direction, is that going to hurt your small parcel pricing? But ideally, it would be good if you just knew those things off the bat. So make sure you know what mode of freight you're trying to solve the challenges for, and then more importantly, ask the hard questions to the third-party logistics provider and ensure that they have expertise and experience supporting companies like yours in those modes. So the second question, and one that I think is so important, is understanding and asking the third-party logistics provider how they get paid. Now, there's a lot of different ways that third-party logistics providers can make their money, and that's okay. We don't want to be against 3PLs making their money. You want them to be profitable. You want to be a good customer for them, but understanding how they make their money is very important. And there's a lot of different ways that occurs, and I'll break down some of those methodologies right now. What I'm not necessarily going to do in this video is go into the pros and the cons or my personal opinions on which one of these revenue models is best. I'm going to do a separate video on that. So if this is something that you're looking for a little bit more insight on, stay tuned and we'll break down these 3PL revenue models a little bit more in the near future. So these revenue models could range from anything from something like a gain share. A gain share, for example, being where you and the third-party logistics provider establish a predetermined benchmark. The third-party logistics provider goes and negotiates new rates with the carriers and then reduces that benchmark and basically takes a percentage of the delta of that. So if you've got a cost per pound that's 25 cents and they bring it down to 20 cents, well, there's a 5-cent delta there, and they'll share in a portion of those savings with you, traditionally somewhere in the range of 40 to 50%. And that's called gain sharing. It's a contingency model. It effectively means that the third-party logistics provider is only compensated if they they are successful in procuring savings for you. Another way that third-party logistics providers often get paid is maybe like a transaction fee. So they might be getting paid for every single shipment that you process, or every parcel that you manifest, or maybe they're getting paid for every single invoice that they audit for you, or something along those lines. So again, it's the more volume that you're doing with them, the more that they're being compensated, which kind of aligns you guys in that regards, but that's what's called a transaction model. Another one that's pretty simple and really common is just a standard management fee. So this might be a weekly management fee, a monthly management fee, an annual, whatever. You can slice it and dice it however you want, but effectively the third-party logistics provider is not really being involved in the invoicing at all, and you just have a pre-agreed amount where they send you an invoice for their services every week or every month or something along those lines. The most popular one traditionally in third-party logistics is the margin model. This is just kind of an all-in cost. It's a little bit more comprehensive than some of the other payment structures that we mentioned. Really all this means is that similar to how you probably price products for your business, the third-party logistics provider has access to a set of carrier rates. They put a margin on top of these, and then those are the rates that you get. So you effectively get transportation rates or freight rates from the 3PL almost exactly like you would get them if you were direct to carrier. And there are some other ones out there that are a little less common, such as off-bill discounts, where maybe the third-party logistics provider is getting paid directly through a rebate from the carrier. But those are a little bit less common, and again, we'll break those down in a video in the future. The most important thing is that you understand those various revenue models, understand what you're trying to do, understand how you want the third-party logistics provider to be aligned, and then make sure that you select a carrier that can actually facilitate the revenue model that you're looking for. So the third point, and piggybacking right off point number 2, is to understand what services the company is actually going to offer you within that revenue model. Now, I know this sounds a little bit straightforward, but bear with me for a moment and let me explain. So within the revenue models that we just broke down, sometimes third-party logistics providers will actually kind of pick and choose and offer a hybrid model. So you may think, for example, that you're working with a provider who's going to deploy a margin model, but maybe they also gain share off of the audit services, or maybe you're going to work with a company who gain shares off the small parcel contract optimization element, but then puts a margin model on your less than truckload or full truckload freight. A lot of times it's just not common for a third-party logistics provider to have one standard all-encompassing revenue model that reflects all modes, all services, or something along those lines, especially once you start getting into the technology element of this, the TMS side, right? Transportation Management System, because it's not uncommon for third-party logistics providers to maybe charge you integration fees, charge you customization, charge you licensing or support fees or something along those lines. So it's really important that you get your hands on the agreement itself. Work with the third-party logistics provider to have a breakdown of those services, how they charge for them. Some of them might offer them a la carte. Some might not give you a choice, and it's just sort of a take it or leave it all-in model. Again, not really going to break down which one's best or which one isn't. It really depends on your business, but understanding those things, again, is such an important part of the transportation sourcing process, because if you're comparing one third-party logistics provider to another, and one offers these services, but another one doesn't, or maybe one offers and they charge for it, and the other offers it, but they don't charge for it, it's going to be really difficult to accurately and fairly compare those third-party logistics providers without knowing those things and understanding what the all-in cost model is and what benefit you're getting for that cost model. All right, so then jumping into the fourth one to piggyback on what we were talking about with the technology element is finding out if the third-party logistics provider owns and develops and maintains a proprietary transportation management system, or if they utilize somebody else's transportation management system, or if they offer a multitude. Again, there's a lot of different elements to this. You've got certain third-party logistics providers out there who own their own system. It's proprietary. They develop it, they maintain it, they support it. You've got other third-party logistics providers out there who might be parading around as if they do own their own TMS, but when in reality, they're actually just utilizing an enterprise version from a major software developer, and they're reskinning it and putting their logo on it and just kind of slapping that on there and then offering it to the market as if it is their own, and it isn't. And then in the third category, you've got companies out there who may just be logistics technology or service integrators who really don't own their own tool. They might have a sort of a bucket of providers that they can go into, but they have expertise in those various TMS platforms, and then they help you implement and integrate them. Again, which one of those is best for you really depends, but I will caution and say that if the third-party logistics provider does not own their own technology and it's not proprietary to them, and you think that integration of that technology with your existing systems like ERP, warehouse management, e-commerce, or any just sort of customization of the tool that you're going to need because your internal business processes are really unique, it's probably not going to be in your best interest to go with a third-party logistics provider who does not own their technology, because they're going to have to depend on a third-party vendor to themselves to actually do that integration, actually do the customization, which sort of takes the keys out of their hands and can traditionally lead to hidden costs, maybe longer lead times to actually get that development done, and that sort of thing. So again, just understanding, do you own your TMS? Do you develop it? Do you guys do the integration work yourself, or do you depend on an outside provider, is a really important question that I think you should ask when you're deciding if that's the right third-party logistics provider for you. So the fifth point, and this one is really kind of more specific to the consolidated freight modes like less than truckload and full truckload, which is understanding if the third-party logistics provider negotiates account-specific rates or rates exclusively for you, the customer, or if they just offer wholesale rate structures, right? So a lot of 3PLs out there, especially the big ones, they have this sort of consolidated consortium style freight pricing where any business can jump onto it. Depending on the size of the third-party logistics provider, there might be 1,000 companies, 5,000 companies, 10,000 companies, you name it. And that's a really great thing because it means that pricing is leveraging a lot of volume, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it was built and tailored for your organization. You might just be location one of 10,000 on a larger pricing program, and so doing things that require a little bit more of an intimate relationship with the carriers becomes a little bit more challenging. When you're on a wholesale rate structure, it's a little bit more difficult to get things like staged trailers or daily pickups, or maybe negotiating FAKs into your pricing and that sort of thing. So really understanding, especially if you're a larger shipper, if you're shipping over $500,000 a year in volume, and especially if you're shipping over $1 million a year in volume, you need to understand what the pricing that you're getting from the third-party logistics provider is. Is this account specific? Did you negotiate this just for me based on my lanes, my volume, my commodities, my needs? Or am I just jumping onto some large consortium style rate program that any of my competitors or any other business can jump onto as well? Because it's going to make a big difference relative to how those agreements are negotiated and the services that you can get from the carriers through that third-party logistics provider. Number 6, and there's really no right or wrong answer here, and again, it's really going to depend on the mode of freight that you're looking for the third-party logistics provider to offer you expertise in. But number 6 is finding out if they're asset-based or not. Now, this is really more specific to the full truckload space. There are a lot of full truckload third-party logistics providers who are also asset-based carriers. And what that means is that they have the ability to guarantee you capacity because they own the trucks, right? In LTL, third-party logistics providers don't really have trucks. They're not really asset-based. There are some less than truckload carriers who offer logistics services like XPO and some other ones, but by and large, most of the major third-party logistics providers in LTL are obviously not asset-based providers. However, in the full truckload realm, that changes quite a bit. And again, depending on what you need, if you need to be able to guarantee capacity, if it's very important to you that you have staged trailers or dropped resources or that sort of thing, it may be important to you to find a full truckload provider who is asset-based. So again, understanding why you might need a provider to be asset-based. Are you okay with sourcing a majority of the volume to one carrier, or do you want to break that out? These are the kind of things that you need to be asking to the third-party logistics provider to find out if they're a right fit for you. Okay, so the final and 7th point and the 7th question that you need to be asking to a third-party logistics provider, and one that I think is often overlooked, is asking them how much freight they manage, specifically in the mode that you're looking to partner with them on and have them accomplish something for you. So I think people overlook this for the wrong reasons. What you're probably assuming that I'm going to say is you should ask them how much freight they manage, because the bigger they are, the better, right? They're a huge $10 billion third-party logistics provider. That means they have expertise in every mode. They must have great technology. They've got really smart people, and they can solve any challenge that I have. And I understand why you would naturally go to that place. However, you have to think about where your company sits in the landscape of shippers and really how much volume you bring to the table. And that's not a knock if you're a smaller shipper. It just means that if you're a $50,000 shipper and you're trying to partner with a $10 billion freight management company, what do you think your $50,000 in business is going to mean to them? Whereas maybe if you partnered with a $50 million or $100 million provider, your $50,000 is going to represent a substantially larger chunk of their overall managed freight volume than to that $10 billion provider. Now, conversely, you don't want to find somebody who's so small that they don't necessarily have technology or resources or leverage, because we need them to be controlling enough volume that they can drive great pricing for you in the market. It's just about finding that right size provider. So the question that you should really ask yourself when asking the third party how much freight they manage is, what's going to be that right size where my business represents enough volume to that company that I'm going to matter to them, that they're going to drive tailored solutions for me, that they're going to be willing to build me custom tools and new things, while also making sure that they're not so small that they don't necessarily have the technology or the resources or the tools or the expertise or the talented people that I need them to. So finding out what is that right size for you is something that I think is really, really important. All right, guys, so that is it. Those are the 7 questions that you should be asking to your third-party logistics providers that you are including in your sourcing event. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, as always, please, 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 please make that like button turn blue. Please consider subscribing to the channel, leave a comment. And as I said a few times in this video, we're gonna have more content coming that breaks down some of the elements of this video a little bit more. So again, if you're looking for more information about this stuff, then please consider subscribing so you get that notification when the next videos come out. Again, so thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate you swinging by. I hope you guys have a great day. Rock on.